Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere where sandals slap on cold flagstones, candle wax never quite comes off your sleeves, and the loudest sound you'll hear is your own stomach gurgling through the morning psalms. Welcome to a medieval convent somewhere between a beehive of devotion and a boot camp for the soul. You enter quietly because there are rules, and you're already breaking one by breathing too loudly. The place smells like wet wool, old wood, and oddly milk. Not the sweet kind you pour into cereal, but the tangy, slightly sour scent of something fermenting slowly in the shadows. You don't know it yet, but you've just stepped into the birthplace of something both strange and holy. Cheese that was made specifically not to make noise. You probably won't survive this, by the way. One misstep, one clumsy clang of a pewter cup, and Sister Magdalene will glare at you like you just kicked a relic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge softly through the cloister walk, the long arched corridor that links the convent's essential spaces: chapel, dormitory, kitchen, and the mysterious place known only as the cool room. It's still dark outside, though a blue-gray smear on the horizon hints that morning prayers aren't far off. The bells haven't rung yet, mercifully, but the air is already humming with the kind of silence that only strict discipline can sculpt. This isn't your average medieval household. The women here have taken vows not only of chastity and poverty, but also of obedience and, crucially, silence. That doesn't mean no talking. There's something called regulated speech, but it does mean no pointless chatter, no idle gossip, and definitely no humming while you work. Unless you're Sister Euphemia, who somehow gets away with it. The stone beneath your feet is worn smooth from centuries of sandaled pacing. The walls are decorated sparsely. A faded crucifix, a few stern saints with halos carved from wood. But as your eyes adjust, you begin to notice something else. A repeated motif carved into stone lintels and stitched into the hems of habits. A wheel. Not a wagon wheel, not a wheel of fortune, a cheese wheel. You raise an eyebrow. Could it be? Yes, it could. And it is. See, this particular convent, nestled somewhere in the misty folds of early 12th century Burgundy, isn't just a place of worship. It's a dairy. A surprisingly well-run one at that. And while many monastic communities were known for making beer, wine, or ink, these women specialized in something quieter, something sacred in its own oozy way: cheese. But not just any cheese. No, this was quite cheesy, as in cheese made with the specific intent of not making any sound during its creation, aging, or consumption. Why? Because in a world where silence was a form of prayer, even the wrong squish at the wrong moment could be a disruption. Now, you might think that's absurd, and you'd be right, but you'd also be missing the point. In the Rule of Saint Benedict, the 6th century monastic code that shaped most Western religious life, silence wasn't just recommended, it was revered. Let us do what the prophet says. I said, I will guard my ways, that I may not sin with my tongue. That's a direct quote, by the way. And yes, they took it very seriously. This meant meals in silence. Prayers were whispered or chanted in unison. Work carried out with a monk-like, well, nun-like restraint. And so when it came to making cheese, Everything had to be, if not literally silent, then spiritually discreet. No clattering pots, no squeaky presses, and absolutely no sloshing. One friar's record, possibly embellished but delightful nonetheless, recalls a nun who once had her cheese vat confiscated because it burbled like a sinful throat. That's some harsh dairy judgment. Historians still argue whether the quiet cheese was truly an intentional product of monastic rules or simply a happy accident of early refrigeration techniques. Some believe the emphasis on silence exaggerated over time, turning into a legend. Others point to the surviving letters of Abbess Elisabeth of Santa Guda, yes, that's real, who wrote sternly about the temptation of audible curdling. You can't make this up. Well, actually, you can. And maybe they did. But the cheese was real. By dawn, the convent is fully awake, but not in the way you're used to. There's no bustle, no shouting, not even a rooster crowing. They don't keep roosters, too boastful. Instead, there's a coordinated rustle. Robes swish as nuns pass each other with nods. A single bell dings once, echoing like a pebble dropped in a well. And the kitchen is already filled with the faint scent of warm milk and herbs. You step inside, careful not to disturb the careful choreography. One sister is gently heating milk in a wide copper pan. Another stirs slowly with a paddle carved from cherry wood. No one speaks, but one nod from the prioress signals that today's batch is meant for guests, meaning you. Lucky you. There's a low shelf where yesterday's cheeses rest under muslin, shaped like plump moons. None squeak, no crack. They simply breathe, slowly. And you begin to understand. In this place, even cheese knows how to meditate. You follow the warm, milky smell out through the herb-walled cloister and into the dim light of the dairy house. It's separate from the main convent buildings, like a secret tucked in the elbow of the garden, behind the sage and lavender bushes. You brush past a rosemary branch that tickles your wrist like a tiny broom. The door creaks, but even the creaking here feels polite. Inside, the dairy sisters are already at work. Technically, they aren't a special order, just a group of nuns assigned to dairy duty. But over the years, they've gained something close to cult status among the others. The way Sister Laurentine can stir a vat with her eyes closed. The way Sister Beatrix can tell by scent alone whether a cheese will behave in silence. The way Sister Odile communicates is entirely in eyebrow movements. You don't need to speak when you've got a cheddar sixth sense. There's a rhythm to it all, soothing and precise. Stir, wait, check, wait, drain, wait, turn, wait. All done in near-perfect silence, save for the occasional blessed be whispered under breath when a curd forms just right. It's in this dairy temple that you begin to understand just how intricate this cheese-making business really is. It's not just dumping milk into a bowl and hoping for the best. It's part alchemy, part devotion, and part very quiet science. They use raw milk straight from their own goats, which live up on the hill and eat wild thyme, mossy clover, and sometimes, when no one's looking, Sister Euphemia's laundry. The goats are not quiet, but once their milk is in the pail, the vow of silence begins. Rennet is added with a slow, circular gesture like blessing holy water. This isn't the industrial stuff. It's carefully extracted from dried lamb stomach linings, cleaned with ash, and dried in the sun. You wrinkle your nose, but hey, if it was good enough for the Virgin Mary's monastery, it's good enough for you. And then there's the cheesecloth, or rather linen cloths, so tightly woven they could double as napkins for angels. These are rinsed in rosemary-infused water and pressed gently to strain the curds, without the telltale squelch that would offend the silence. There's an art to pressing the cheese, too. Wooden boards are used instead of metal molds because they don't clank. Weights are made from river stones, hand-wrapped in flax rope so they don't thud when lowered. The nuns move like shadows in a candlelit ballet. Everything about the process is designed not only for flavor, but for discretion. You could say the cheese was born under vows of restraint, patience, and deep reverence for the peace of early morning. But here's the thing, cheese doesn't always cooperate. There's one troublesome wheel on the shelf that lets out a faint hiss every time it's turned. They call it the breather. It's been aging for weeks now, and while it tastes divine, it insists on giving tiny audible sighs, as though it's too tired to be holy. No one knows what to do with it. One nun suggests an exorcism. Another suggests eating it quickly, before it tells any secrets. Historians still argue whether this tradition of silent cheese-making was spiritual devotion or just a practical adaptation to communal living. After all, stone-walled kitchens amplify sound like cathedral acoustics. One misplaced spoon could startle the whole dormitory. Some records suggest that loud noises were believed to disturb not only the sisters' focus, but also the digestive humors of the cheese. A loud kitchen, they claimed, made cheese more prone to cracking. Was it science? Superstition? A medieval placebo? No one knows for sure. But what is certain is that the cheese made in silence had a certain texture to it, creamy but firm, subtle in scent, and utterly lacking in squeak. You take a moment to look around. On a high shelf, tucked behind some dried fig leaves, you spot something odd. A tiny wooden plaque with a carved goat on it, holding a finger to its lips. Shh! Down in the courtyard, a bell tolls softly for lauds, the early morning prayer. The sisters wipe their hands, cover the curds, and retreat in quiet procession, leaving the cheeses to contemplate their next phase of life. And now, it's your turn. The prioress motions for you to stay and watch the aging room, the cool room mentioned earlier. It's not locked, but it feels forbidden. You walk down a narrow spiraling stone stair into the earth. The air gets cooler, damp with a hint of brine and dust. Your footfalls are swallowed by the thick silence. The room is small but feels infinite. Stone shelves line the walls, stacked with cheese wheels in every stage of aging. Some are pale as parchment, others dusky gold, and a few look like the surface of the moon, pitted, cratered, and possibly plotting against you. You stand still. No footsteps, no voices, just the occasional drip of condensation from the low stone ceiling. Then tick. You turn. Nothing. Then tick again. A soft, organic sound, like the crackle of a loaf of bread cooling. That's the cheese. It's breathing. Well, not literally. But as the rinds age, gases escape. Some wheels do it quietly. Others, not so much. That's why the nuns invented the quiet cheese category in the first place. The less a wheel farted, the more it was praised. You sit in the stillness for a while, letting the coolness soak into your bones. It's peaceful, almost monastic. You realize that silence isn't emptiness, it's a kind of fullness, thick with presence. Even the cheese you suspect knows that. And somewhere upstairs, Sister Euphemia hums. You rise from the cool stone bench and brush a few stray crumbs of, was that mold? Limestone? Time? From your robe. No one knows how long you've been sitting there. Time seems to stretch in this place, as if the clock itself has taken a vow of silence. When you emerge back into daylight, the sun has fully risen. Bees hum lazily near the lavender. A donkey, somewhere beyond the hedges, lets out a dramatic sigh, perhaps in protest of being up this early. But here in the convent, everything moves slowly, precisely, as if the whole world has been wrapped in wool and left to steep. Now it's breakfast hour, not a feast, not even particularly warm, but it's quiet, and that's the point. In the refectory, a long stone hall lined with high wooden benches, you find yourself seated at the very end of a table. A ceramic bowl of lentils steams gently in front of you. There's a single round of bread, coarse and seeded. And, resting delicately on a square of linen, a wedge of the famous quiet cheese. It doesn't look like much. Pale yellow, maybe a few specks of thyme, a soft halo of moisture at the rind. But when you lift it to your lips, the aroma is oddly gentle, like butter made from sunlight and rain, like something a grandmother might pack in a linen pouch and forget beneath a tree for 50 years. But of course, no one is allowed to say any of that. The only sound in the room is the delicate tapping of wooden spoons against clay bowls, and the very faint rustle of sleeves as hands move in prayer. You chew very, very carefully. This, you realize, is where the challenge begins. It's one thing to make cheese quietly. It's another thing entirely to eat it quietly, especially when the rind has a satisfying crackle, and your neighbor's jaw doesn't even seem to move when she chews. You wonder if she has internal jaws. You wonder if you're the only one here making noise. You glance at the carved owl high on the refectory wall. Its wooden stare is unblinking, judging. Welcome to the Benedictine breakfast experience. According to the rule of Saint Benedict, meals were moments of contemplation. A reader would sometimes stand at the front and recite scripture or the life of a saint, while the others chewed silently. That role rotates, and not everyone's cut out for it. Sister Ursula once tried to spice things up by reading about the martyrdom of Saint Lawrence during lentil stew night. The groans were technically silent, but emotionally deafening. Historians still debate whether these silent meals were truly observed in all orders. Some convents allowed whispering, others permitted speaking only on feast days. A few rebellious communities even sang while they cooked. But here, the silence is baked into the walls. The very air seems to ask you to listen harder, not with your ears, but with something softer. It's in that stillness that you begin to notice the subtleties. A cheese that squishes slightly when you bite into the rind. That's a younger wheel, fresh, barely aged. A good choice for spring breakfasts, when everything is soft and new. A firmer, nuttier wedge with a tiny squeak against your teeth. That's been aged in the cellar for at least a month. Not ideal for silence, but acceptable in winter when the wind is too loud to hear it anyway. And then there's the crumbler. A dry, brittle wedge that falls apart like sanctified sawdust the moment you look at it too hard. This one is dangerous, not for your soul, but for the acoustics. It might shatter like glass. It might bounce off your plate. Sister Marie-Louise once bit into a two-aged slice during Pentecost and cracked a molar. She wore that silence like a badge. There's even a rumor that one batch of cheese made in haste, too much salt, not enough humility, spontaneously exploded in the storeroom. A novice screamed. A wall was blessed. The cheese was excommunicated. Of course, that could all be convent gossip. And gossip, as you know, is supposed to be silent too. After breakfast, the nuns file out with hands folded, robes swaying gently like the pendulums of a human clock. No one speaks, but a few offer you polite nods. You're starting to feel it now, the lull of routine, the comfort in repetition, the sacred hush that hums just beneath daily chores. You decide to join the Dairy Sisters again. They're gathering herbs for flavoring, marjoram, chamomile, lemon balm, quiet herbs, nothing too zesty, nothing that makes your mouth pop or pucker. Flavors in this place, like voices, are meant to linger, never shout. Sister Beatrix hands you a basket. You help gather violet leaves, said to make cheese more delicate and also to soothe stomachs. There's an old belief that whatever emotion you felt while picking herbs would infuse the cheese itself. Joy makes it creamy. Pride curdles it. You don't know if that's true, but just in case, you pick with reverence and maybe a little awe. A butterfly lands on your sleeve, even though it doesn't flap too loudly. The afternoon sun filters gently through the high garden wall, painting drowsy stripes across the cloister stones. You find yourself back in the dairy, standing beside a tub of freshly separated curds that glisten like little clouds of pearl. Sister Laurentine lifts a corner of her linen veil and gives you a look that says, "This is the part where you learn to hush your hands." Because making quiet cheese isn't just about biting your tongue, it's about body control. Every gesture counts. The way you ladle, the way you press, even the way you breathe while you stir, can be the difference between blessed serenity and who just made the curd squawk. You dip your hands into the warm whey. It's thick, rich, and somehow velvet soft. A little steam curls upward, brushing your cheeks like a sigh. You move slowly, mimicking the nun's fluid motions. In silence, every action becomes exaggerated, meaningful. The simple act of lifting curds feels like a sacrament. Today's task? Transferring curds to a row of wooden molds? You'd think this would be straightforward. Scoop, drop, press. But no, the scoop mustn't splash. The drop mustn't plop. And the press, dear heavens, the press must be slow enough that the whey seeps, not spurts. Sister Odile, the eyebrow nun, doesn't even need to say a word. One lift of her left brow, and you know your wrist flicked too fast. You slow down. You breathe out. You press like someone polishing moonlight. Why all this fuss? Because sound was considered disruptive to contemplation. In these convent walls, every clang was a crack in the divine hush. And cheesemaking, like praying or sweeping or mending robes, was a form of devotion. The quieter your work, the more holy your product. At least that's how they saw it. And yet cheese is alive. Literally. It's teeming with bacteria, enzymes, little bubbles of gas and acid playing out their microbial drama. That means sometimes, even if you're silent, your cheese is not. There's an infamous story the sisters whisper in safe corners, far from the refectory. One batch of midsummer cheese, hastily made and stored too warm, started growling. Not loud, not all at once. Just a low, persistent rumble, like an unhappy tummy under several habits. For days, no one could figure it out. They blamed rats. They blamed demons. They blamed Sister Euphemia's humming again. Eventually, they discovered a wheel of cheese forgotten behind a broom that had fermented too fast. It had cracked open, hissed audibly, and oozed something that looked disturbingly like regret. They named it Lucifer's lunch. and buried it in the garden under a rosemary bush. The bush still grows sideways. Historians still argue whether this story is metaphor, monastic folklore, or some exaggerated hygiene warning from an overzealous abbess. But even today, aged nuns will nod gravely when someone brings up the wheezing wheel. You're careful not to cause a repeat performance. Once your cheeses are pressed and stacked, the nuns return to one of their quietest duties, herb blending. These aren't just flavorings. Some are chosen to calm digestion, others to purify thoughts. Sage for clarity, anise for warmth, a few petals of marigold to keep the tongue gentle, according to Sister Beatrix, who may or may not be referring to actual speech. One of the most revered blends is Silent Spring, a mix of elderflower, chamomile, and something secret that only the eldest nun knows. It's added to cheeses served on feast days of extra contemplation, Lent, Advent, or after a particularly vocal thunderstorm. There's even a small ritual for sprinkling it, 3 pinches, clockwise, then a pause for reflection. If your pinch is too loud, yes, that's a thing you must start again. You manage it on the second try. The cheeses are now wrapped in damp muslin and taken to a cooler chamber, another step in their long meditative journey. It's astonishing, really, how much silence goes into every wheel. Hours of hushed labor, days of mute patience, weeks of listening to the subtle shifts of rind and air. But then again, isn't that what this whole place is about? You pause at the doorway of the chamber. A breeze rolls past from a hidden vent in the stone wall, carrying with it the scent of thyme, chalk, and something soft and savory you can't quite name. It smells like stillness. Behind you, one of the novices knocks over a ceramic jug. Clack. Every head turns. No one speaks. No one scolds. The sound just echoes, then disappears, like a pebble dropped in a pond. The novice blushes. You offer a sympathetic glance. It's not easy, walking this path of quiet cheese. You think back to this morning's cheese slice, the one with the gentle crunch. Maybe silence-like flavor isn't about the absence of noise, but the presence of attention. The bell for none. Mid-afternoon prayer rings once. The sisters bow their heads. And somewhere in the aging room, a cheese lets out a dignified puff. The prayer bell fades into the stone, absorbed like mist into wool. You shuffle out with the others back into the cloister's warm hush, where light slants lazily through vine-covered arches. The sisters drift like candle flames, quiet, steady, impossible to rush. You pause under a fig tree in the corner courtyard. Its leaves cast dappled shadows that dance on the paving stones. A small wooden sign reads, Silva Sapientiae, the Grove of Wisdom. Apparently, this is where the sisters go when they need a good think, or more rarely, a quiet giggle. Because yes, despite the vows, despite the quiet cheese and the creaky discipline, these women do laugh, just very, very softly. You sit on a smooth bench, brushing aside a curious snail, and contemplate what you've seen. Cheese here isn't just food, it's character formation. Each batch is a lesson in restraint, humility, and timing. Which brings you to a question that's been slowly bubbling in your mind. What does cheese sound like? In your world, the idea of loud cheese might feel absurd. But to a medieval nun sworn to silence, it was no small matter. Some cheeses squish, others squeak. A few crackle at the crust when cut. Then there are the bubbly ones, blue cheeses and strong rinds that hiss quietly as they release their gases. Here, that's practically sacrilege. Sister Beatrix once described a perfectly made wheel as a song that never leaves the mouth, which is poetic and slightly confusing, but also oddly accurate. You learn from Sister Laurentine that during aging, some wheels are moved not by hand, but with long wooden paddles wrapped in felt just to prevent squeaking against the shelves. And when the cheese must be flipped, there's a two-handed method involving cloth gloves and a slow, prayerful lean. They call it the pivot of grace. If you drop a wheel, that's not just clumsiness, it's considered a lapse in spiritual awareness. You nod solemnly. You are not ready to flip cheese. In fact, you are gently assigned another task, feeding the goats. It's a short walk uphill to where the convent's herd grazes on a terraced patch of wild herbs. The goats are as unruly as the nuns are composed. One has a limp. Another has a beard so long it drags through the marjoram. They all smell faintly of summer and very faintly of cheese. The moment you appear with your woven basket of clover and cabbage stems, the goats descend. Sister Euphemia, your guide today, simply laughs into her sleeves and lets you figure it out. Feeding goats is not a silent activity. There is crunching, there is snuffling. One goat sneezes, another tries to chew your sandal. You're tackled by three at once, and you're fairly certain one of them just winked at you. If the convent's code of silence applied to livestock, this entire pasture would be in solitary confinement. But Sister Euphemia doesn't seem concerned. She speaks softly to them, just a breath above a whisper, using what she calls goat Latin. You think she's joking, until one of the goats genuinely sits down when she murmurs, subito sedere. After feeding time, you help with the milking, another sacred task. The milking pails are carved with symbols of the saints. Saint Agnes for gentleness, Saint Brigid for strength, Saint Curdina, possibly fictional, for curd control. You learn there's a rhythm to milking that matches the chants in the chapel. Some sisters even hum the tune silently while working, letting the inner pulse guide their hands. You try it, barely mouthing the syllables of a hymn. Miraculously, the goat relaxes. You feel strangely honored. Back in the dairy, the milk is filtered again, this time through a sieve embroidered with a spiral pattern. You ask about it. Sister Odile raises her eyebrow meaningfully and whispers, to remind the milk where it's going. You're not sure what that means, but you nod like it's profound. The final activity before Vespers is cleaning. You are handed a cloth and shown how to scrub the cheese boards with intention, but without drama. This means no slamming, no splashing, no sighing. Wipe in circles. Whisper with your hands. Clean not just the surface, but the spirit of the wood. There's a superstition here that boards retain memories. If you clean too roughly, the next cheese made upon them will taste unsettled. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were widespread or simply particular to this eccentric little convent. Some records suggest similar customs in other monastic dairies, including one Cistercian abbey that refused to use boards at all, preferring river stones bleached in moonlight. Others dismiss it as holy folklore, charming but mostly nonsense. But as you kneel beside the aging rack, cloth in hand, you don't feel foolish. You feel quiet, which you realize is kind of the whole point. Upstairs, a novice rings the bell for Vespers. You hear the soft padding of feet on stone. The cheese wheels, those little monks of milk and thyme, sit peacefully on their shelves, their rinds thickening in sacred silence. And down in the garden, One goat sneezes again. Evening falls slowly over the convent, like a heavy woolen blanket drawn over a resting body. The light that slips through the cloister arches turns soft and lavender. You've just returned from Vespers, where psalms drifted through the chapel like incense smoke, floating but weighty, sacred in its stillness. No one raised their voice. Even God, it seems, prefers to whisper here. After prayers, Sister Beatrix beckons you with a small nod and leads you down a narrow corridor you haven't noticed before. The walls close in slightly, the air cooler, with the scent of limestone and wax. She carries a clay lantern in one hand, its trembling flame casting gentle shadows on the floor. No one speaks. Words would feel like pebbles dropped in a still pond. At the end of the corridor stands a low wooden door bound with dark iron. Burned into the beam above it, in sharp but elegant lettering, are two Latin words: Quietus caseus, quiet cheese. You almost smile. This is it. The door groans slightly as it opens, not rudely, more like it's stretching awake after a nap. And behind it, you step into a chamber that feels holy, not in the way of stained glass and choirs, but in the way of deep ancient caves, the sacred hush of places that have seen too much time to speak easily. The temperature drops. The smell is rich and earthen, moss, rock, old wood, and age itself. Stone walls cradle shelves, built straight into the hillside. On them rest the convent's oldest cheese wheels. Some are wrapped in linen browned by decades. Others are exposed, their rinds cracked like parched soil. A few look nearly petrified. All are tagged with handwritten notes dates, ingredients, symbols you don't yet understand. Sister Beatrix hands you a slate tablet and a stub of chalk. Then she produces something curious. A slim wooden dowel tipped with a round of soft felt. Your task is simple. Listen. Each cheese must be tested not by taste or scent, but by sound. You kneel beside the first wheel, its surface dusty but intact. Pressing your ear gently near the rind, you give it a tap with the dowel. The response is nothing. Pure, blessed silence. You mark a small check on the slate. The second wheel lets out the tiniest creak, like the whisper of old leather shifting on a bench. You glance at Sister Beatrix. She arches a single eyebrow. You mark it with a tiny question mark. The third wheel? It sighs. A long, low exhale, as if the cheese has grown tired of being perfect. The sound isn't loud, but it's distinct. You and the sister both hear it. She leans down, sniffs, listens again. Then silently, she lifts the wheel and places it into a wicker basket labeled Repentance. You don't ask where it's going, but she gestures for you to follow. Down another corridor, this one carved directly into the rock. It slopes downward slightly, and the walls sweat with mineral-rich moisture. At the end, another room, smaller, less reverent. This is where the flawed cheeses go. The talkative ones, the hissers, the burblers, wheels that crack too early or fermented too enthusiastically. But unlike what you feared, they are not discarded. They are cherished in their own way, used for sauces, spreads, soups, or gifted to guests with less rigid expectations. The nuns call them mercy cheese. You grin. Even here, in a world ruled by silence, there is room for forgiveness. The scent in this chamber is sharper. Some rinds flake a little. Others ooze gently from hairline splits. One wheel hums faintly when the air shifts. You're not sure if it's real, or if this room just teaches your imagination to be louder than your ears. Historians still debate whether these listening rooms were fact or fable. Some say it was metaphor and allegory for inner stillness. Others point to ancient dairy texts with curious instructions. Test the wheel not only with knife, but with ear. One surviving manuscript even includes a sketch of a cheese trumpet, an ear horn allegedly used to detect interior disturbances. You're not sure what to believe. But when Sister Beatrix returns you to the main chamber, she sets down a new cheese. Still warm, still soft, barely formed. Its surface shimmers slightly with leftover whey. She places it on the top shelf, nestling it between two silent elders. It makes no sound. She leans in, and for the first time all day, speaks aloud just one line. Her voice is low and careful, like she's afraid to break the spell of the room. It is a good beginning. You nod. And somehow, you understand what she means. Silence here isn't the absence of noise. It's the result of complete presence, of patience, of humility. And cheese, at least in this place, is both mirror and reward for that stillness. The door closes behind you with a soft click. The lantern dims. Outside, the fig tree rustles in the breeze, casting long shadows over the garden wall. And for the first time, you listen not just with your ears, but with everything. Morning returns like a breath, drawn through linen cool, quiet, and smelling faintly of damp straw. You wake to the sound of no sound at all, save for the soft rustle of habits moving past your door and the faint creak of floorboards beneath slippered feet. There are no bells this early, only the rhythm of practiced movement and a deep shared intention. Begin the day without disturbing it. Today, you're joining the sisters in one of their most delicate routines, caring for the tools of the trade. Not the spiritual ones, mind you, the cheese ones. Because in a place where silence is sacred, even a wooden ladle or a cloth strainer carries the weight of reverence. You meet Sister Odile at the edge of the courtyard. She is already halfway through, unrolling a length of linen, cleaned, dried, then soaked in a rose-thyme rinse that smells faintly medicinal and strangely maternal. She doesn't speak, of course, but she gestures for you to join her at the long stone table where various dairy tools have been laid out for their weekly cleaning. Here's where it gets unexpectedly philosophical. Because to clean in silence isn't to rush through a chore, it's to contemplate each object. The cheese knives are rubbed down, not just to polish, but to remember what they've cut. The ladles are soaked not to remove curd, but to cleanse memory. The woven cheese mats, reeds bound into flat spirals, are set in the sun just long enough to dry, but not so long they grow brittle. Everything is done with intention, and yes, you're expected to clean quietly. No sloshing, no tapping, no clattering rinsing bowls. If you sneeze, you're to bow slightly to the tool, as if to apologize for startling it. You are, of course, terrible at this at first. Your bucket tips, your cloth drops. One of your ladles lets out a sharp clack that echoes through the arcade like a heretical sneeze. Sister Odile doesn't scold. She just gives you a glance so precise it could curdle milk. You take a deep breath, slow your movements, and begin again. The sisters believe that the tools retain memory, not just of what they've done, but how they were treated. A gently used strainer makes gentler cheese. A ladle handled with calm produces calmer curds. There's no theology to this, it's just convent logic. And frankly, in a world where cheese can breathe and sigh and occasionally growl, who are you to argue? Historians still argue whether this belief in object memory was widespread or simply one of those local eccentricities that grew into ritual. A few surviving manuscripts from other orders describe similar practices, though one Benedictine abbey in northern Italy reportedly burned all their tools each spring and made new ones, believing even silent objects needed spiritual rebirth. Here, they take the opposite approach: preservation through patience. Once your tools are deemed clean enough, Sister Odile gives a tiny approving nod that feels like a doctoral degree. You're ushered into a much less expected part of convent life: the scent cellar. It's not on any official tour. It's down a half-hidden stairwell behind the refectory, lit by glass vents high in the stone wall. You'd never find it on your own. This is where the convent stores its most sensitive wheels, cheeses infused with herbs so delicate, so fleeting in aroma, that they must be aged in near silence and total olfactory isolation. The room is small. Shelves are narrow. The air is thick with 100 aromas, none of them loud. Chamomile, fennel, violet. A touch of honey, maybe? Some of the wheels are wrapped in waxed leaves. Others are buried halfway in ash and dried mint. You are instructed wordlessly not to touch, only to breathe. One wall contains a scroll, faded and brittle. Sister Beatrix unrolls a small corner and lets you see it. It's a hymn, not one sung aloud, but a kind of cheese prayer meant to be hummed internally during preparation. The notes ascend like rising steam. The lyrics? A meditation on curd, patience, and the way time ripens flavor and spirit alike. You feel like you've entered the secret garden of cheese monks. A bell rings faintly above, calling the sisters to mid-morning prayer. You bow slightly and begin the walk back up, past the scent shelves, the linen-draped wheels, and the silent hymn still humming in the back of your mind. Back in the daylight, the world feels louder. The birds seem almost rude. A cart creaks on the road outside the convent wall and you flinch. Funny how a few days of practiced quiet can retune your entire sense of sound. You find yourself back in the main dairy now, watching as today's batch of curds is unmolded and salted. The wheels are smaller today, single-portion cheeses for feast days or guest offerings. Each is placed gently on a reed mat and sprinkled with a blend of thyme, lemon zest, and crushed marigold petals. They sparkle slightly in the light, and then you see it one wheel shifts, just slightly. A twitch, really. You lean in. It makes the faintest pop. Your eyes widen. Sister Laurentine hears it too. She picks up the wheel, turns it gently in her hands, and whispers, "Not to you, but to the cheese. Not today, my little trumpet." She sets it aside. Tomorrow, perhaps, it will be quieter. The afternoon drapes itself across the convent like a soft woolen shawl, thick, muted, and just slightly scratchy in its warmth. Shadows stretch longer now. The hum of bees slows. Even the goats, usually so loud in their goat-like opinions, seem to be dozing beneath the fig trees. You're invited without a word, of course, to the convent's small scriptorium. Yes, a scriptorium. Not every nun here makes cheese. Some copy manuscripts. Others tend herbs. A few tend silence itself, watching over it like gardeners tending a still pond. But today, your path crosses with the sisters who document things quietly, carefully, and occasionally with a flourish of sarcasm, so subtle it may take 300 years to detect. The room is sunlit, quiet in the way that makes every page turn feel like a thunderclap. Shelves line the walls, filled not with books, but scrolls, recipe bundles tied in twine, and dozens of little folded slips tucked into clay pots. each marked only with a tiny drawing of a cheese wheel. This, you learn, is the archive of curd. Not its official name, of course. But Sister Euphemia winks when she writes it on a slate and slides it toward you. Here they record experiments, not just ingredients and quantities, but sound profiles. One parchment reads, batch 12 mint and elderflower rind, turned twice daily, slight hiss on day 8, silenced after sage application. Another. Quietest wheel yet. Suspect it is dead inside. Delicious. You're handed a goosefeather quill and invited to record your own notes from yesterday's aging room session. You write something reverent and possibly too long. Sister Euphemia glances at it, nods, and draws a tiny goat applauding in the margin. This is how records are kept here, not just factually, but lovingly, because cheese in this convent is a living memory, a story that breathes through rind and time, one that must be documented, gently. But not all cheese history survives. There's a shelf in the corner marked The Vanished. On it, half-burned scrolls, recipes with missing endings, pages so faded they might as well be ghost stories. One particularly curious entry ends mid-sentence. And upon stirring the milk with the ashwood spoon, the curd did. And that's it. No conclusion. No follow-up. Just a faint wax stain. And what might be a smudged thumbprint trailing off into nothing. The sisters speculate. Was it divine interruption? A spilled ink pot? A vow of silence so strict the recipe refused to finish itself? Historians still debate whether these recipes were ever real or simply flourishes added later by romantic scribes. One theory holds that certain ingredients like saffron or myrrh were intentionally omitted to preserve the sanctity or secrecy of a cheese. Another theory: some cheeses were so powerful, so spiritually intense, that to write them down fully would tempt hubris. You prefer the third theory. Someone just got distracted by a goat. Sister Beatrix now invites you outside to the upper herb terrace. It's high above the dairy, on a ledge that catches full afternoon sun and wind. Here, the sisters grow their most aromatic additions: basil, lemon verbena, savory, lavender, and something called Nuns whisper, a rare plant said to make even garlic taste demure. But more fascinating than the herbs are the chants. Yes, chants. The sisters, it turns out, compose short melodies for the seasons, not to sing to the cheese, but to sing to the cows. You stand in mild disbelief as Sister Laurentine holds a folded parchment and hums a soft, 3-note tune toward a cow named Agnès. The cow blinks, seems unimpressed, but lets herself be milked anyway. These are called cheese chants, and they're only sung during milking or herb gathering. Never in the kitchen, never near the salt, always outdoors and always quietly. One spring chant translates roughly as, "O milk of morning, clot with care, let curds form gently, silent prayer." Another, sung in late autumn, is about letting go, for both cows and humans. The idea, they tell you, is not that the chant changes the milk, but that it changes them, makes them softer, slower, more in tune with the process. It's not magic, it's just mood. You're handed a little bell, tied with faded ribbon. It's not for calling anyone, it's for marking the moment after herb harvest single chime to thank the plants. You ring it. It sounds like glass exhaling. Back in the dairy, today's batch is ready for molding. The curd is soft, warm, thick like porridge. But instead of the usual round molds, the sisters are experimenting with a rare tradition, Angel's Loaf, a square mold used only during high feast seasons. The reason? It makes the cheese harder to slice without squeak. That's the challenge. You're handed a wire cutter and told to try. You press down, slowly, carefully, it still squeaks. Sister Odile writes something on a slate and flips it towards you. Some angels squeak too. The day softens further, as if the sun itself has taken a vow of stillness. Golden light pours over the convent's stone walls, pooling gently in the corners like warm broth. You're starting to recognize this hour, not by any bell or announcement, but by the way the shadows curve, the air calms, and the sisters move just a little slower. You find yourself following a path behind the goat pasture, past the fig trees and bee boxes, where a narrow trail leads to what the sisters refer to never aloud as the trading gate. It's not much of a gate, really. More a crooked wooden arch tucked beneath an overgrown yew. But beyond it lies the path to the outside world, a world that, remarkably, still craves the cheese of this silent convent. Here's the quiet secret they don't write in the ledgers. Not all the cheese stays inside. Sister Euphemia, ever the diplomatic mischief maker, oversees what she calls holy negotiations. Once a month, a small basket of finished wheels is brought here tucked in among herbs, linen, and sometimes a tiny pouch of dried apple slices and left for pickup. In exchange, the convent receives ink, wax, new sandals, perhaps even parchment, if the trade has been fruitful. It's all very above board mostly, except when it isn't. You notice, for instance, that one of today's outgoing wheels has a faint dusting of ground nutmeg. Not standard, not in any recipe you've seen. Sister Beatrix catches your eye and shrugs an elegant little gesture that seems to say, "Divine mystery is a valid flavor note." Then she hands you something, a folded note tied with goat leather. It reads, "For the shoemaker, one wheel, no creak. Tell him his boots were too chatty last time." You're not sure what to do with that, so you nod solemnly, like this is a perfectly normal trade policy, and place the wheel into the designated basket. This quiet bartering has gone on for decades, maybe centuries, while the convent itself maintains the sacred hush. It exists within a network of trusted vendors who know the rules. Don't knock, don't shout, and never, ever bring a musical instrument. Historians still debate how widespread these cloister trade arrangements were. Some believe it was purely economic. Others suggest it was a form of spiritual outreach, the monks and nuns exporting not just cheese, but their way of life, one silent wedge at a time. One record from a nearby abbey refers to the nuns of this region as the voiceless vendors of the Rhine. Whether that was meant as praise or sarcasm is unclear, but the title stuck. Back inside, you pass through the library on your way to the chapel. In one corner, near a faded tapestry of St. Bridget milking a cow, lies a dusty trunk with brass latches and no label. Naturally, you open it. Inside, broken tools, burned-out ladles, cracked clay pots, relics of failed batches, but at the bottom, tucked beneath a length of dried linen, you find something else. A book, hand-bound, its cover stained with old whey, its pages warped by moisture. On the first leaf, in steady handwriting, Experiments in Quietude. It's not a formal recipe book, more a diary of cheese failures. Notes like, added elderberry. Result, purple curds, suspiciously joyful. Tried aging by moonlight. Mouse incident. No further notes. New mold strain whispered when sliced. Disconcerting. You laugh quietly, of course, and turn another page. There's a sketch of a cheese wheel with wings. Beneath it, the dream, cheese that ascends in silence. You return the book gently. Later that evening, as supper approaches, you're asked to join a small group preparing tomorrow's feast cheeses. These are special served during holy days, celebrations, or visits from very important monks, VIMs. The recipe is ancient, the proportions exact, but tonight Sister Laurentine decides to experiment. She adds a single dried fig to the mix. A fig, of all things. Scandalous. There's a moment of silence in the kitchen, a ripple of playful horror, then a whisper from Sister Odile. May the rind forgive us. You stir the curds slowly. The fig melts into the warmth, disappearing completely. Maybe it will add sweetness. Maybe it will ruin the batch. Either way, the act feels oddly brave. Later, you help prepare the molds. For these feast wheels, the sisters use carved wooden presses etched with ancient symbols, stars, vines, spiral suns. One even bears the outline of a dove, holding a wheel of cheese. You press the curd with both hands, carefully, reverently. And as you do, something clicks into place, an understanding you hadn't realized you were waiting for. This cheese isn't just made in silence. It is silence, not absence, not emptiness, but fullness so complete it has no need for noise. Like a closed eye still seeing light. Like a prayer you don't have to speak out loud. You finish your work. Wash your hands in rosemary water. Step out into the darkening garden. And far off, under the fig tree, a goat sneezes. Twice. By now, your ears have recalibrated. You can hear a linen sleeve brushing a stone wall. You can tell the difference between a goat hoof on dry soil versus one stepping on moss. You can even hear the subtle hiss of a cheese rind expanding ever so slightly under the weight of age. This evening, you're sent to help with a particularly delicate task. Testing the convent's most mysterious creation. It's known simply as the whisper wheel. You're not told why it's called that, only that it resides in a locked alcove just beyond the apothecary, and that it hasn't been touched in 6 weeks, not since it was sealed, wrapped, and blessed on the feast of St. Clare. Sister Beatrix leads the way. The passage to the alcove is narrow and unusually low, as though the architecture itself is urging you to bow. The light here is different, bluish, veiled and cold. There are no candles, only faint sunlight filtering through mica panes, giving the walls a pearlescent glow. When you reach the chamber, the door is already slightly open. Inside, a single wooden pedestal supports the whisper wheel. It's about the size of a small drum, wrapped tightly in a fine cloth, embroidered with spiral patterns that resemble the rings of a tree or the ridges of an ear. A small stone rests on top of the cloth. You're told to remove it. You do. No creak, no shift, just an immense, listening silence. With cloth in hand, you slowly unveil the cheese. The rind is pale, almost translucent, with a faint shimmer like moonlight on snow. Around the base, a ring of crushed lavender petals has dried into a soft purple halo. You are not to slice it. That would be premature. You are here to hear it. Sister Beatrix hands you the felted tapping wand from earlier, this one older, worn smooth from decades of use. You gently tap near the edge, and then you pause. There's no sound, not even the subtle thump of rind against board. It's as if the air around the cheese absorbed the impact before it happened. You try again, this time near the center. Still nothing. And then, on the third attempt, just as your hand begins to retreat, you catch it. A whisper. Not a word, not a breath, but a sound like parchment being turned in a far-off room. You look up. Sister Beatrix has already heard it. She smiles, faintly, like someone who has just witnessed a minor miracle. "It's ready," she whispers. What happens next feels almost like a rite. The cheese is carefully moved to a silver tray, one used only for this purpose. A cloth soaked in rosemary water is laid beneath it. 3 drops of lemon balm extract are dabbed onto the rim, not for flavor, but for ritual, and then the tasting begins. Only 3 sisters are chosen for this: the prioress, Sister Laurentine, and you. You weren't expecting that, but Sister Beatrix gestures again. No words, just trust. You each take a sliver cut with a curved knife that looks more like a musical instrument than a kitchen tool. The slice makes no noise. The rind parts cleanly, silently, as if it understands what's being asked. You place it on your tongue. And the flavor? Not loud, not sharp, not tangy, just wide. It tastes like quiet mornings, like old prayers, like time after rain. It dissolves slowly, not melting, but disappearing, leaving behind only warmth and a slight hum in the ears. The prioress closes her eyes. Sister Laurentine presses a hand to her heart. You forget to breathe. This isn't just cheese. It's memory you can taste, reverence you can chew. It is the still point in a turning world, somehow made edible. Historians, of course, know nothing about the whisper wheel. No record of it exists outside this convent. No mention in abbey ledgers or merchant books. And if you asked, the sisters would simply smile and talk about curds and temperatures and nothing more. But you know, now you know. Once the tasting ends, the remaining cheese is wrapped again, sealed with a ribbon, and placed back on its pedestal. It won't be touched again for another year, unless something extraordinary happens, like a papal visit or a goat learning Latin. You leave the chamber changed. Outside, the wind has picked up slightly. The fig tree rustles louder than usual, almost scandalously so. You can hear the chapel bell ropes clinking faintly in their tower. A bird lands on the garden wall, ruffling its feathers with an audible fluff. It all feels deafening, but you smile, because now you understand the quiet, not as absence, but as mastery. A kind of acoustic art, shaped over centuries, held in place by rituals as delicate as lace and just as intentional. And you feel that if you could hold your breath long enough, you too might make something that speaks only in whispers. The next morning arrives, with a soft drizzle tapping at the cloister windows, tiny beads rolling down the glass, like thoughts that haven't quite formed into words. The convent breathes in unison with the weather, slower than usual, as if even the clouds have joined the vow of silence. Today, the dairy is calm. No heavy lifting. No experimental batches. Just routine. Checking wheels, turning them, brushing rinds with rosemary brine. You've learned how to move without making sound, how to let your hands speak what your mouth cannot. But as you begin to clean a batch of ash-ripened wheels, you notice something odd. One of them is missing. Its place on the shelf is bare, marked with a small parchment slip that reads, "Transferred to chapel." You blink. A cheese wheel has been sent to the chapel? Sister Odile nods at you with that practiced deadpan look of hers, the one that could mean yes, no, or don't ask questions you aren't spiritually prepared to have answered. But after a few moments, she tilts her head and gestures for you to follow. You do, through the cloister, past the herb gardens still glistening from the rain, into the chapel itself, where the air always feels a few degrees cooler and the light somehow more solemn. There, on the altar, not on the altar, exactly, but respectfully nearby, rests the missing cheese. It has been placed atop a folded linen square, flanked by 2 unlit candles and a small bowl of thyme blossoms. You wait. Sister Beatrix enters last, carrying a bound manuscript. She opens it, not to read aloud, but to display a particular page. An illuminated recipe, centuries old, bordered with gold leaf vines and tiny drawings of cows wearing halos. This is the ceremonial wheel. Made only once per season, it's aged exactly 40 days, brushed with rose water and sea salt, and turned daily by the eldest nun in the convent. It is not eaten. It is not sold. It is simply honored. Why? Because this wheel represents what could have gone wrong. That batch that curdled too fast. The one that burst during aging. The wheel that spoke too soon, cracked too loudly, or refused to still itself. For every perfect cheese, there are dozens that nearly made it. And so, once each season, the sisters select one wheel, not the best, but the most grateful, to be offered, not as a sacrifice, but as a reminder. Silence is not perfection. It is perseverance. You kneel with the others. No words, just breathe. Sister Laurentine lights the candles. The prioress bows. And then they wait, together, for nothing in particular. It's the kind of waiting that feels like listening. A stillness so complete it somehow vibrates. Your knees ache, but you don't shift. You notice your heartbeat, your breath. The faint, almost imaginary scent of the cheese floral, mineral, calm. Later, when the ceremony ends, the wheel is wrapped again and taken to the archive not to be recorded, but to be remembered. It will rest in a cool chamber behind the chapel, among others like it. No one eats them, no one opens them again. They simply remain, like held breaths, unspoken prayers that never needed answers. Historians still argue whether such rituals were theological or symbolic. Some say they were invented as a way to use up unsellable cheese with a flourish of mysticism. Others insist that the practice predates Christianity entirely, that the honoring of food through ritual silence is older than Scripture, older than stone. You're not sure where you stand on that, but something in your chest has gone very still. After the ceremony, the rest of the day continues quietly. You help in the herb room, laying out marigolds to dry on slatted trays. You refill the lemon balm jars. You tidy a row of labeled bottles with names like Clarity, Temperance, and Courage. There's a jar labeled Sleep. Inside, dried lavender, chamomile, and a note. You unfold it. It reads, "Drink only when the mind speaks too loudly." You tuck it back. Before evening falls, you're asked to help with one more task, inspecting the stone drain that runs beneath the aging cellars. It's old, possibly Roman, and still works perfectly. Rainwater from the cloister roof funnels through it, keeping the air cool and moist. But moss likes to grow there, and moss, apparently, is too loud. You crawl into the passage with a lantern and a long-handled brush. The walls drip gently. Water trickles past your knees. And from somewhere above, the scent of aging cheese floats down like a blessing. You scrape carefully, gently. And for a moment in the narrow tunnel, you hear it again. That parchment-turning whisper. Not from your hands, not from the stone, from a wheel, resting above you in the dark, still shelf. You pause, you smile, and you brush the moss away. Evening doesn't fall here, it settles. Like flour on a work table, like steam on glass. Soft, quiet, almost ceremonial in its descent. You notice it first in the shadows. how they lengthen without hurrying. Then, in the rhythm of the sisters, their movements slower, more contained. And finally, in the sky beyond the cloister arches, a smooth, smoky violet that signals Compline is near. But tonight, instead of heading straight to the chapel with the others, the prioress herself appears at your side. She doesn't speak. She only nods, and you understand. Follow her. She leads you past familiar spaces, the herb drying racks, the cheese-scented hallways, the stairs that sigh under centuries of footsteps. But then, she turns toward a part of the convent you've never entered, a door so narrow it vanishes into the wall unless you're looking for it. She opens it. You follow her into a corridor, unlike the others. It's older, rougher. The stones here feel untouched, unpolished, as if they were placed not by masons but by the hill itself. The air smells faintly of beeswax and old time. A stillness lingers that even the chapel can't match. At the very end stands a rounded door, barely tall enough for a grown person. The prioress stoops slightly, then gestures for you to enter first. Inside is a small circular chamber. There are no windows, no candles, no icons. Just one wooden chair at the center of the room, and in front of it, on a simple slab of stone, a cheese wheel. This is not just any cheese. It doesn't bear a name, a date, or even a cloth covering. It sits exposed, its rind blooming with age, pale, cracked in places, gently dusted with what looks like ash or chalk. Around its base lies a ring of dried lavender, brittle now but still aromatic. The air in the room is different, thicker, heavier. The prioress does not join you. She remains just outside the threshold, silent, still, as though guarding something sacred. She raises a hand, inviting you to sit. You do. The chair creaks faintly beneath you. That alone feels like a breach of protocol. Then, nothing. No instructions. No ritual. Just the cheese. And silence. You wait. It takes time, several long, quiet minutes, for your thoughts to slow down enough to notice what's happening. First, your breathing changes. Then your shoulders lower. Then you become aware of the smallest sounds. Your heartbeat in your ears, the distant rustle of leaves outside, the whisper of your own clothes as you shift slightly. And then you start to feel the cheese. Not smell, not hear, just feel. It's as though its silence is radiating. Not empty, but full of waiting. It's the kind of stillness that feels alive, attentive, not passive, but purposeful. This, the prioress later tells you, is the listener. It was placed here nearly 2 decades ago by a sister who believed quite literally that cheese could absorb presence. That if you aged it in absolute silence, untouched, unobserved, unjudged, it would begin to reflect the energy around it. That it might, in time, develop its own kind of awareness. You're skeptical. And yet, here you sit, struggling to maintain eye contact with a dairy product. The longer you sit, the more you sense it. This cheese isn't waiting to be eaten. It isn't offering itself as nourishment. It's simply being, fully, unapologetically, completely. The prioress enters quietly, almost imperceptibly, and places something at your feet. A small wooden bowl of rosemary water and a folded cloth. You take the cloth and wipe your hands not out of cleanliness, but reverence. Then, without thinking, you bow slightly toward the wheel. You're not sure why. No one told you to. It just feels appropriate. There's no official record of the listener. It's not logged in the inventory. It's not part of the trade wheels. It's never been tasted. It's not for sale. And yet, it might be the most carefully guarded object in the entire convent. Its purpose? Stillness its function, presence. It is, in every way, the physical embodiment of the rule of Benedict in curd form. Some say it was once used in a midnight vigil during a terrible storm, when the sisters gathered in this very room and simply sat with it. Others whisper that it once turned blue at the edge, not from mold, but from the ink of a nearby manuscript left open too long. Historians, of course, don't mention it. It isn't the kind of thing you put in footnotes, but the sisters remember. They pass the story through posture and glances, through the soft placement of hands, and the way they treat the room like a sacred wound. You sit with it a while longer. Eventually, the prioress places a finger to her lips, not as a command, but as a benediction. She relights her lantern, turns, and walks back down the corridor. You rise slowly, feeling both heavier and lighter than before. As you step back into the main cloister hall, you can hear Compline beginning faint voices chanting in low tones, the final hymn of the day rising like mist through the stone. You walk toward the chapel, but pause just before entering. Behind you, that room still hums. It has no relic, no scripture, no statue, just a wheel of cheese, and the silence it holds. And somehow, that's enough. Tonight, after complying the final prayer of the day, you are not guided toward your room as usual. Instead, Sister Euphemia appears beside you with a small half-burned candle. She doesn't speak. She simply places it in your hands, nods once, and begins walking. You follow. The path winds through the sleeping cloister garden. Lavender and mint linger faintly in the cool air. Dew glistens on the stone path, catching the light of your candle in quiet flickers. The goats are already asleep, tucked into their hay beds, twitching ears hinting at dreams of mischief and clover. Above you, the night sky is wide and richly dark. No moon, but stars soft, scattered and shy, like they too are observing silence. Eventually, you arrive at a small structure hidden under a curtain of ivy near the edge of the convent grounds. You realize with some surprise that you've passed this place many times and never noticed it. Sister Euphemia opens the weathered wooden door. It creaks slightly, not loud, just enough to remind you this place has been waiting a long time. Inside, the air is cooler, earthy, still. You step into a narrow stone-walled room. Wooden shelves rise up to the low ceiling, stacked with cheese wheels of every size and color. Some are wrapped in linen, others rest in straw. All seem to exude a kind of deep calm, as if they are not just aging, but meditating. This, Sister Euphemia writes on a small slate and holds up for you to see, is called the night room, not officially, not in the ledgers. But among the sisters, this name is passed down with the kind of care you give to a lullaby. You take a seat on a low wooden stool. The candle in your hand trembles slightly, not from wind, but from the weight of the place. Sister Euphemia places a heavy, leather-bound book in your lap. Its cover smells faintly of ash and thyme. The title reads, Tendencies. You open it slowly. It is not a recipe book. It is a behavioral journal. Wheel number 27, silent during humid weather, developed a strange sweetness after being stored near the chapel's linen chest. Wheel number 91, let out a soft sob when handled, left alone for a week. Later, compliant. You turn more pages. Some entries are technical, others are almost poetic. Wheel number 112, noisy, impatient, chaotic, became bearable only after being sung to by accident. This is not cheese making. This is cheese listening. You rise and walk between the shelves. Each wheel is marked with a chalk symbol. No names, no dates, just codes. A spiral, a crescent, 3 small dots, a leaf, a goat's hoof. You point to one with a spiral. Sister Euphemia writes, "Not yet." You nod. You approach the last row darker, quieter. These wheels are spaced farther apart. No straw, no tags. They rest with the kind of dignity reserved for objects that no longer need anything, not even approval. Sister Euphemia points to one with a dusky rind and sage leaves pressed gently into the crust. "The first cheese I ever made here," she whispers. You glance at her. She looks at the wheel. "I oversalted it. Thought I'd ruined it," I cried. "You wait." She continues, still softly. 3 weeks later, it won a tasting award at the village fair. You smile. She doesn't. "We never entered it. Someone else did. We never found out who." She exhales. "It taught me something. Not every mistake is loud. Some need time." You turn to the shelves again, and you begin to notice each wheel has a different silence. One is quiet, like sleep. One is quiet, like someone holding their breath. One stacked alone on a shelf near the back is quiet like a secret that's forgiven you before you've asked. As you pass a small wheel marked with a spiral and dusted with ash, it shifts, just slightly. You stop, look closer. It is still. You say nothing. Sister Euphemia pretends not to notice, but her eyes linger on it a second too long. Outside, the wind moves through the orchard. You smell the first hint of ripe apples, cold basil, and something else, something too old to name. You blow out your candle. Sister Euphemia does the same. Neither of you says good night. Some silences are too sacred to speak through. You sleep soundly that night, not as escape, but as arrival. The kind of sleep that doesn't feel like drifting off, but like sinking into the center of something vast and still. No tossing, no thoughts, just breath, slow and regular, like waves lapping gently against the shore of yourself. You wake early, before the bells, before the goats, before the sky has fully made up its mind about being day. The convent lies in that soft threshold between night and morning. You slip quietly from your bed, barefoot across cool stone. Even your footsteps feel different now, lighter, less certain of the need to be loud. You don't wake the others. You don't need to. Your body already knows. This is your last day here. No one told you. There is no departure ceremony. But you feel it in your bones, the way you feel a change in season, not with the eyes, but with the skin. There is a time to arrive in silence, and a time to leave with it. But first, one more ritual. You've been invited wordlessly, but clearly, to assist in something called the morning brine circle. It sounds mystical. In truth, it is ordinary. But in this place, the ordinary becomes holy through repetition, reverence, and a pinch of salt. You step into the cool back room where 4 sisters are already gathered. Each stands before a small wooden table. Between them, a large ceramic bowl of brine. Floating inside, sprigs of rosemary, thyme, and lemon balm. And in baskets nearby, dozens of cheese wheels, fresh from a week of quiet aging. Your task is simple. Unwrap the cloth. Inspect the rind. Gently brush each wheel with the herb-infused brine. The sisters move slowly, deliberately. You join them. The first cheese is soft at the edges, showing a bit of overgrowth in one corner. You lift it like a fragile relic. Its rind is speckled with tiny pinprick bubbles, signs of fermentation, but not rebellion. You dip your cloth, squeeze gently, and begin the slow circular motion, clockwise first, then counterclockwise. As you brush, a faint puff, escapes from a small fissure in the crust. Not a hiss, not a squeak, a sigh. A tired, grateful, perfectly acceptable sigh. Sister Beatrix, standing beside you, hears it. She glances over and smiles, not indulgently, but with recognition, as if the cheese just told a familiar joke. She dips her cloth again and moves on. You do too. Wheel by wheel, you carry out the same pattern. And with each one, you notice something. A difference not in smell or touch, but in presence. Some wheels are bold, leaning into your hands, as if they've been waiting to be seen. Others are shy, curling slightly inward, as though unsure if they've aged well enough. And a few just rest there, completely still, trusting the moment to pass over them without judgment. You begin to see these cheeses not as products, but as characters. Not as things made, but as things becoming. Historians rarely mention convent dairies. They write about kings and crusades, plagues and papal bulls. They rarely linger on salt water and linen. They don't record how silence thickens in a room when 4 women brine wheels of cheese before sunrise. Or how care can be communicated entirely through the way one tilts a bowl. But here now, you understand. There is nothing small about small things. The circle finishes. The wheels are rewrapped in fresh cloths. Each is labeled not by name, but by feel. A tiny chalk symbol, a sprig of thyme, a subtle fold in the linen. You help return them to the cellar shelf. Then Sister Odile approaches you with a small bundle. It's a wedge of cheese modest in size, lovingly wrapped in waxed linen and tied with a thin cord of twine. Tucked beneath the string is a single fresh rosemary leaf. You turn it over. On the label, in quiet script, "For when the world gets loud." You press it to your chest. Somehow, it feels warm. You're not sure what kind it is. You don't need to be. You already know what it will taste like. It will taste like rosemary and rain, like stone warmed by afternoon sun, like lavender faded, just enough to feel like memory, like quiet that isn't empty but full. Before you leave, Sister Euphemia appears, chalkboard in hand. She scribbles something, pauses, then flips it toward you. You heard more than most. That's it. You nod. There is no farewell, no hugs, no dramatic doorsteps or waving from windows. Only a few soft glances. A hand brushed against your shoulder. A basket of herbs left on the bench where you sat yesterday. And when you pass through the wooden gate at the edge of the orchard, no one follows. You step into the outside world. The road is quiet at first, but you know that won't last. You know what's waiting. Voices, engines, clocks, demands. The rattle and roar of a world that is always filling itself with sound. Afraid, maybe, of what might be heard in the hush. But now, you carry something with you. A silence that is not silence. Its presence, wrapped in waxed cloth, tied with time, pressed into memory, alive. The world greets you with a noise that isn't loud, exactly but busy. Carts clatter across cobblestone. Merchants call out prices with voices trained to cut through wind and chatter. Children shout in joy or frustration, sometimes both at once. Horses snort, dogs bark, doors slam. Conversations spill from windows like laundry on a line. It's all normal, ordinary, but it feels different now. You walk through the bustle with your bundle clutched gently to your chest, the wedge of cheese wrapped in waxed linen, tied with twine and rosemary, gifted to you with no ceremony. It isn't heavy, yet you feel its weight. Not physical, but symbolic, like you're carrying a silence too sacred to let fall. You don't try. to resist the noise, but you don't absorb it either. Something in you has changed. Where before you might have flinched, rushed, spoken to, fill the space you now listen, not with the urgency of needing to reply, but with the gentleness of knowing that not everything requires your voice. The rhythms of the convent still echo in you. You breathe more slowly. You walk more softly. You look others in the eye longer, but say less. And perhaps the most surprising thing of all, no one seems to mind. The world expects noise. It rewards it. But when you bring stillness into it, people don't always fight it. They lean into it, sometimes without realizing. A merchant lowers his voice when speaking to you. A child stops running as you pass. A dog that was barking pauses just long enough for you to notice its ears twitch toward you, not in warning, but in acknowledgement. You wait to open the cheese, not out of fear that it will spoil, but because something in you wants to do it right. Eventually you choose a quiet evening. The wind outside is soft. The kitchen is still. You light a single candle not out of necessity, but reverence. You place the bundle on the table, unwrap it slowly. The waxed cloth peels back like the page of a familiar book. The linen beneath still holds the faint scent of rosemary and thyme. You unfold it carefully, and there it is. The cheese. A simple wedge, pale, dappled at the edges, tender at the center. It doesn't gleam. It doesn't announce itself. It just is. You cut a piece with the side of a spoon, not for flair, but because that's how Sister Beatrix once showed you how even utensils can be gentle when they want to be. You place it on your tongue. The flavor is quiet, but not shy. You taste stone warmed by sun, beeswax and lemon balm, a hint of thyme from the wrapping. And beneath it all, something wordless. Not sweet, not salty, not sharp, just present. It's not the best cheese you've ever had. It's the truest. And that, you realize, is the point. You eat in silence, not as a discipline, but as a gift to the moment. When you finish, you fold the wrapping cloth and tuck it into a drawer, not to reuse, but to remember. It smells faintly of what it carried, of where you've been. The next morning you wake early, not out of duty, out of habit. You light a fire, boil water, and before the day begins in earnest, you write 3 words in your journal, still carrying silence. It stays with you. Days pass, weeks, then months, and you begin to notice things you never did before, how certain corners of your home catch the wind and hum slightly at dusk, how your own footsteps change depending on the shoes you wear and the mood you're in, how the act of preparing a meal in silence feels less like a task and more like an offering. People begin to notice too. You're quieter now, someone says. You seem calmer, says another. No one means it as a question, but if they did, you wouldn't explain. Not because it's secret, but because it isn't easily translated. How do you explain that silence is not absence, but presence? That a wheel of cheese taught you how to listen? That you watched a room deepen just because no one spoke? You keep the memory of the convent tucked inside, not in a loud, glowing place, but like a stone in your pocket. Something weighty, reassuring, always there when needed. And one day, without quite meaning to, you decide to try. To make cheese, not for profit, not even for sharing, just for yourself. You buy milk, you warm it slowly, you stir clockwise, then counterclockwise. You hum just barely, you don't rush. And when the curds begin to separate from the whey, you feel a swell of recognition, not success, but return. This is the practice. This is the presence. This is the silence made physical. You wrap the curds in linen and press them under a stone you found in your garden. You wait. And in the waiting, you hear everything again. The breath of your house, the rhythm of your hands, the sigh of the cheese as it settles into itself. You understand now why the sisters don't label every wheel, why they whisper instead of measure, why they sing to goats and wait for the rind to respond. Because silence is not something you create. It's something you make room for. And once you do, it arrives. In cheese, in breath, in you. You didn't expect the silence to follow you this far, not across borders, not through marketplaces and muddy roads, not through towns where bells ring without rhythm and gossip spills quicker than wine. But it does. Even here, miles from the convent, days since your last contact with a nun or a goat, the quiet clings to you, not like a weight, more like a scent. Faint rosemary, a trace of wool, beeswax, and something else you can't quite name. Maybe devotion, maybe milk. You find yourself in a small town tucked into the crease of two hills. The inn is loud, full of clattering spoons and stories retold for the 5th time. The kind of place where ale flows and no one asks your name until you've stayed 3 nights. You sit near the hearth, not speaking, just listening. That's when someone notices, not your face, not your clothes, but your stillness. You don't say much, says a woman 3 stools down, her hair pinned up with something that looks suspiciously like a fishbone. Are you a monk? You smile. Just a traveler. Quiet sort of traveler, she replies. Then adds, half suspicious, you hiding from something? You shake your head. Number, just learning how not to fill every space. She laughs, but it's not mocking. Wish more men around here knew how to do that. The bartender chuckles. He's probably just tired of hearing his own thoughts. And maybe you are, but maybe you're not tired of them at all. Maybe for once your thoughts feel less like a storm and more like mist, curling gently around old stones. Present, but not demanding. Alive, but not loud. The next day, you walk to the edge of the village where the air thins and a line of sheep trails over the ridge. You sit on a sun-warmed rock and unwrap a piece of bread. The crust crumbles, the inside still soft. You tear it slowly. From your satchel, you retrieve the smallest wedge of cheese, your last one from the convent. You've been saving it, not for a feast, not for someone special, just for a moment that feels like a pause. This is that moment. You slice it carefully, eat it slowly. No one watches, no one speaks. And in that stillness, the cheese offers more than nourishment. It offers memory, a kind of time travel via taste. Your tongue remembers the stone floors, the damp air, the rustle of habits in candlelight, the brining room, Sister Odile, the soundless altar, the listener. Historians still debate whether these so-called silent orders had any real culinary influence. Some claim their recipes were too rustic to have endured. Others argue that without those forgotten wheels pressed in cloistered corners, European cheesemaking wouldn't have developed the complex flavors we now prize. But what no one debates, what anyone who's been there understands, is the care, because when you're not speaking, your hands notice more. The temperature of the curds, the way milk behaves when the storm is coming, the difference between a rind that needs another day and one that just wants to be held. You pack up the cloth, brush the crumbs from your lap, and continue walking. No destination, really, just forward. The sky changes as you climb, blue to slate to the kind of gold that only happens when the sun realizes it's nearly too late. You pass a shepherd humming to his flock. He nods at you. Doesn't ask where you're going, doesn't tell you where you've come from, just shares the air. Later, in a clearing, you meet a girl stirring something thick and white in a pot over a fire. Her eyes narrow, her spoon halts. You know anything about milk? She asks. You blink. A little. She gestures with her spoon. This won't set. My mother said it would. She's gone now. So, you take a seat beside her. Look into the pot. It's warm, but not warm enough. The curds haven't formed. The milk is trying, but it needs help. You don't speak. You just reach for a stick nearby, dip it into the fire until it glows, then plunge it briefly into a bowl of cold ash. You drop the tip into the pot. Wait, stir once, counterclockwise. She watches. The curds begin to rise slow and soft like sleepy clouds. She gasps. You nod once. Wait 15 minutes, then press gently. That's all. You stand. Before you go, she asks, who taught you that? You think of Beatrix, of Odile, of the wheel that sighed when you brined it, of cheese that wasn't perfect but brave. You smile. Someone who knew how to listen. The path ahead twists like a spool unwinding in slow motion. You follow it without urgency, your steps falling into the rhythm of the land. Soft dirt giving way to gravel, gravel giving way to tufts of grass, and eventually to silence. Not the absence of sound, but the kind of quiet that hums gently beneath everything. A quiet made not by stillness, but by understanding. You pass small villages where the houses huddle close for warmth, their chimneys whispering little gray sighs into the morning sky. Most people don't notice you, or if they do, they look and then look away, the way you might glance at a monk or a weathered stone. Familiar, but outside your world. A presence, not a participant. One town offers you warm broth and a cracked stool to sit on. The woman who serves you doesn't ask your name, only says, "You look like someone who's heard too much." You smile and nod. That's close enough to the truth. Another hamlet trades you a round of coarse barley bread for 2 slices of your wrap cheese. An old man takes a bite, and his eyes mist not with sentiment, but with something quieter. Memory, maybe, or longing. Tastes like when my mother still believed in saints, he mutters. You don't ask what happened after that. Sometimes the welcome isn't as warm. A boy shouts and points, calling you ghost, and hurls a clump of dirt that misses by a mile. You don't react. Just keep walking. Somewhere along the line, you've learned how not to answer every call. Some noises don't deserve echoes, but the silence, that follows you everywhere. You carry it like a cloak, not heavy but constant. At first, it was something you learned in the convent. Now it's simply yours. Something that settles in your bones. A quiet that listens back. One morning, just as dawn unfurls across the hills like spilled honey, you wake to a familiar sound, one that makes your heart stir. Goat bells. The kind you use to tie with your own fingers. The kind that jingle not just with sound, but with rhythm. A rhythm of hooves and breath and motion. You follow the noise until you see them dozens of goats climbing a rocky slope, grazing in stubborn zigzags. And there, seated on a lichen-covered rock, is a young girl no older than 12. She watches her herd like a falcon would, sharp and still. She spots you before you reach her and raises one hand, not a wave, but a greeting. Measured, confident. You approach slowly. She nods to the boulder beside her. You can sit. They don't mind you. You settle beside her. She opens a palm of dried fruit and passes you a few figs, along with a sliver of pale cheese wrapped in waxy leaves. You accept them gratefully. Her cheese is hard, a bit crumbly, and sharp with an aftertaste of smoke. A little harsh, but not unpleasant. She chews hers slowly, grimacing a bit. I made it too fast. Mama says I don't wait enough. You nod. Patience is the one thing you can't add later. She looks at you curious. You make cheese? You smile. I used to, with some women in a stone convent far from here. Her eyes go round. Real nuns? Very real, you say, and very quiet. She picks at her crust of bread. I try to be quiet too, but Mama says it's not natural, that I think too much. You glance out at her herd. Maybe that's why your goats trust you. You're not trying to be louder than they are. Historians still debate whether women outside convents ever developed their own dairy techniques, or if the sophistication of cheese making belonged mostly to monastic communities. Some suggest rural wives quietly innovated in their kitchens, perfecting salted rinds and smoky brines. But the written records surprise, largely give credit to those within church walls, as if silence not only preserved the cheese, but preserved the story too. The girl offers you a look of half skepticism, half hope. You really lived with nuns? For a while, you say. Long enough to learn how to listen to milk. She giggles. Milk doesn't talk. You take another bite of cheese. Number. But it says things if you let it. That afternoon, she shows you her little shelter, made of flat stones and woven reeds. Inside, a pot rests over embers. Warm milk inside, trying to separate. It's not quite there yet, too cold, too agitated. She frowns at it. I stirred it like Mama said, but nothing's happening. You crouch down beside her, test the warmth with your knuckles, then gesture for a branch. You burn the tip briefly in the fire, then dip it into cooled ash and stir the milk just once counterclockwise. She blinks. Why counterclockwise? You grin. Because sometimes the obvious way is the wrong way. Cheese likes surprises. She watches, eyes wide, as curds begin to gently form cloud-like soft, ready. You both sit in silence, breathing in the scent of scorched wood, hot milk, and goat hair. The fire crackles low. After a while, she whispers, "Will it work?" "It already is," you say. Before you leave, she presses a small wheel into your hands, wrapped in a square of embroidered cloth, uneven around the edges, still soft. "You can take this one," she says, proud and shy at once. "It's not perfect, but it's better." You bow slightly as you accept it. "Thank you." She doesn't ask your name. You don't ask hers. There's no need. You walk away with the cheese tucked under your arm and a warmth in your chest that has nothing to do with the fire. That night, under the branches of a leaning cypress, you unwrap it. You take a bite. And it's good. Not just in taste, but in memory. The next few days unfold like pages in a book you've already read, but somehow forgotten. Each sunrise paints the hills with a light you swear you've seen before, yet it still manages to surprise you. The path beneath your feet, sometimes muddy, sometimes dry and brittle, leads you farther into the folds of a landscape that seems at once quiet and deeply, richly alive. You've learned to read the land the way a nun reads a psalter, not for entertainment, but for meaning. The moss on stones tells you where shade lingers. The way sheep look up before a storm lets you know when it's time to find shelter. And when you smell smoke too early in the day, you know a hearth is nearby. And today, you smell smoke. But it's not the sharp scent of pine wood or the sticky smolder of peat. This smoke smells savory, salty, alive with fat and garlic. and your stomach, being far less spiritually advanced than the rest of you, growls its opinion quite loudly. You follow the scent into a shallow valley where a cluster of buildings leans toward a narrow creek. One large barn, 3 squat homes, and a small stone chapel with a lopsided roof. You approach slowly, as you always do, and find yourself caught by a very peculiar sight. A nun older, round, rosy-cheeked, is crouched beside an iron cauldron, stirring something with a spoon longer than her arm. Her wimple is stained at the collar, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, and she's humming a secular tune you definitely heard in a tavern once. It takes a moment for her to notice you. When she does, she squints, then smiles. Hungry? You nod. She gestures you over and offers a wooden bowl filled with what looks like bean stew. But the beans have dissolved into a thick cream, and floating on top like saints in a boiling baptism is a generous crumble of cheese. You sit and you eat, and there's no other word, divine. Salted sheep's cheese, she says proudly, pressed in muslin and aged in wine barrels we borrowed from the monks. She lowers her voice. They don't know we didn't return all of them. You try not to laugh with your mouth full. She pats the ground beside her. Come on, then. Tell me which convent turned you loose. And so, under a lazy sun and a drifting stew pot, you find yourself recounting the long and winding path that brought you here. Not every detail, of course. Just enough to paint the shape of your journey. The quiet convent, the silent lessons, the wandering, the goats. She listens with both ears. When you finish, she sighs. You wouldn't believe how many wanderers pass through with stories like yours. Not identical, but rhyming. She stands, stretches her back, and begins ladling more stew into smaller bowls. Tonight, she says, we're feeding travelers and 2 visiting abbesses. You're welcome to stay and help, if you know how not to burn lentils. You grin. She gestures for you to follow her into the largest building, a warm hall with wide beams and rough-hewn benches. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, broth, and baked grain. Women bustle around with baskets and pots, laughing, bumping elbows, trading small insults with affectionate tones. You fit right in. Someone hands you a cloth to dry dishes. Another presses a slice of toasted rye into your hand. And someone else, younger, offers a sniff of an herb mixture. For brining, she explains. We're experimenting with lavender and lemon balm. Historians still debate how experimental medieval convents really were with flavor. While most surviving recipes are strictly functional, preserved, salted, stored, there are tantalizing mentions in certain letters of herbal deviations and fragrant infusions. Most scholars agree. Where there's a nun with free time and goats, there's probably a cheese that doesn't follow the rules. As the sun sets, the visitors arrive dusty, noble-looking women with gentle eyes and backs straight as rulers. The abbesses. You watch as they bless the food, not with pomp, but with practiced gratitude. Everyone eats. Everyone is quiet. And for the first time in a while, you feel like the quiet isn't just something you brought with you. It's something you've stepped into. A larger silence shaped like community. One of the younger nuns leans over and whispers, "Tomorrow we're making blue cheese. Want to see how we paint the veins?" You nod, because of course you do. You wake to the kind of stillness only found in old stone buildings. The walls don't creak. The wind doesn't whistle. Even the birds seem to hesitate, as if they too are unsure whether this is the sort of place where song is welcome before sunrise. You sit up slowly, the wool blanket sliding down your shoulder. Your feet touch cool floorboards, just rough enough to remind you that this is real, but not so rough that it's unpleasant. Someone has placed your sandals by the door. Someone who assumed you'd stay, someone who noticed. A faint smell filters through the hallway. Not incense, not firewood, cheese, again. But different today, creamier, wetter. You can smell the salt. Down the corridor, the kitchen hums with motion. It's not loud, not chaotic, just purposeful. Pots shift, doors click open and shut. Water sloshes, soft voices overlap. You join them without announcing yourself. They're working on something called blue cheese today. Not just any blue cheese, theirs. The wheels are pale and soft, resting on wooden planks like sleeping children. And this morning's task? Giving those sleeping children veins. Not by chance, but by choice. They score the wheels with slim iron picks, so carefully, so evenly. Not too deep, not too shallow. They open tiny pathways for the air, the mold, the magic. You're handed a pick and shown how to do it. 3 lines across, 2 down. One nun murmurs. Then flip and do it again. You mimic the motion. The surface resists slightly, then gives. It's like tracing stories into something that hasn't yet decided who it wants to be. Once pierced, the wheels are brushed with a gentle brine water, salt, and a pinch of something fungal and invisible. This will coax the mold to bloom inside the cracks like veins in marble. You hesitate. It feels like playing doctor and artist at the same time. Don't be shy, says the younger nun from before, handing you a brush. The cheese knows if you're scared. You laugh, and so does she. In another corner of the room, an older woman is mixing herbs into a thick paste. Lavender, sage, dried lemon rind. She leans over the mixture, then turns to you. We're experimenting, she says, though no one asked us to. She grins. Historians still debate how much culinary experimentation actually happened inside convent walls. Some say the recipes were rigid, passed down and unaltered, preserved like holy texts. Others argue that nuns, left alone long enough with goats, herbs, and thyme, would naturally get creative, especially when no abbot was around to stop them. You side with the latter. Later, you take a break under the olive tree. The sky is a soft stretch of blue cotton above you. A few birds rustle somewhere above the branches. You're given a round of cheese, still warm from shaping, wrapped in cloth and tied with string. Joining you under the tree is a visiting nun, older, sun-browned, with strong hands and kind eyes. Her robe is different, dyed a walnut brown, and her voice carries the rhythm of the southern hills. She sits beside you without ceremony. Did they tell you yet, she asks, that cheese can make you a little mad? You glance over, raising an eyebrow. I mean it, she continues, pulling apart a piece of rye bread. Too much time alone with aging wheels? You start talking to them, waiting for them to answer back. You smile, but she's not entirely joking. People always think the monks invented cheese, she says. Wrote about it, blessed it, cataloged it. She takes a bite, chews. But most of it was made by women who couldn't read, didn't write, and never got their names in scrolls. Barefoot mothers with chapped hands and goats that wouldn't listen. You nod. Show me the manuscript that tells their stories, she mutters. And you realize you've been living inside one of those stories. Not one that gets written down. One that gets passed by taste, by gesture, by memory. That night, after the prayers have ended and the candles have thinned to flickers, you walk back to the cheese room alone. The others are asleep, but the cheese is awake. You slip through the wooden door, which creaks just a little, and step into the cool air of the aging cellar. The shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, each plank crowded with wheels, rounds, and strange wrapped bundles that look more like relics than food. You walk between them slowly. Some are pale and waxy, others dark and cragged, like tree bark. Some wear herbs, some wear ash. Some are wrapped in leaves. You imagine they all have personalities. Some loud, some bashful, some with secrets. You sit on the floor and lean against the stone wall. The room smells of time, not decay change. 1,000 tiny reactions unfolding in quiet coordination. The cheese is not finished. It's never really finished. And maybe you think, neither are you. You close your eyes, and for a moment it feels like the whole room is breathing with you. You return to the cheese cellar one last time, not because you have to, but because something gentle inside you insists on it. The corridor is dim now, lit only by the echo of footsteps you aren't sure are yours alone. You pass the prayer niches and the garden archways one final time. Each familiar now, each carrying a quiet goodbye of its own. The cellar door creaks as you push it open. The air greets you like an old friend, cool, humid, and fragrant with age. This is not the sharpness of fresh milk or the sting of vinegar. No, this is the hush of things mid-transformation, of rinds thickening, of molds blooming, of time doing its slow, invisible work. You step inside. The room hums in its own way, not with sound, but with presence. The wooden shelves are heavy with wheels resting in rows like monks at vespers. Each cheese is wrapped or exposed depending on its age, its temperament. You can see the tiny, almost imperceptible differences now. The fine dusting of blue on a goat wheel, the way the linen cloth clings tighter around the younger ones. You've learned how to read their moods. You pause in front of a small wheel marked with a green thread. You remember this one barely shaped the day you arrived. It's firmer now. It has weight. It's surviving. You smile, not at the cheese, but at yourself. Behind you, a sister enters. No words. She simply nods and starts checking the humidity jars, lined against the wall. One of them rattles slightly. She adjusts it with a practiced hand. You realize now how much of this life is listening not to words, but to water and weight and the sigh of air through old wood. You sit down on the stone bench in the far corner, the one carved long ago by hands with no name. The bench knows things, you think. The walls, too. If you were to press your ear to them, you'd probably hear it. The long chant of generations, sung in curds and brine and patience. Historians still debate whether the invention of quiet cheese was intentional or accidental. Was it a necessity? Cheese made without disruption, so as not to disturb sacred silence? Or was it ingenuity, developing subtler rennets and gentler methods to remain unseen, undisturbed? The record is fuzzy, incomplete. But down here in this stillness, you understand something the records never quite say. That quiet can be a form of devotion, that even food can carry the shape of a prayer. The nun stands, adjusts a single wax candle on the center table, and prepares to leave. But before she does, she turns back, places something beside you, a small wheel wrapped in cloth, marked with a thin silver thread. "This one's ready," she whispers. You nod. It's not just a cheese, it's a memory made edible. A small, round thank you. As she walks away, the light softens. The candle flickers. The cellar seems to settle deeper into its stone bones, as if tucking itself in for the night. You close your eyes, and for the first time, you don't think of the outside world. You don't think of carriages or cities or lists or clocks. You think only of stillness, of rhythm, of how fermentation needs no applause, only time. Outside, the moon climbs. The convent is asleep. And below, in the deep breath of stone and rind, you finally are too. The story fades here, like candlelight on old brick. You're still in the cellar, or maybe you're not. Maybe you've carried it with you, the scent of cool earth and lavender soap. The soft weight of cloth wrapped wheels resting in your arms. The faintest echo of footsteps and distant Gregorian humming. All of it folding quietly into the darker corners of your mind. No more voices, no more lessons, just breath and shadow and warmth. Let yourself lie back now. Let your body soften like curd in brine. Let the day dissolve around you, and the night ask nothing in return. You've walked through centuries tonight. You've learned how to listen for things no one hears. That's enough. You've earned rest. And the cheese will keep aging slowly, silently, faithfully without you. Sleep well.